I believe most veterans lose thousands of dollars in VA disability benefits, not because the VA is out to get them, but because they don't know how to speak the VA's language. And honestly, I don't blame them. Nobody teaches you how the system really works when you separate from the military. You're told, just file a claim, the VA will take care of you. Then months later, you get that decided letter, not service connected. No explanation why, no guidance, just confusion and frustration. See, the truth is, there's an unwritten playbook for VA claims. It's full of small, technical details that completely change how your evidence is seen and rated. Details like how your doctor phrases a diagnosis, how you word your lay statement, or even which dates you put on your form. These aren't minor things. They're the difference between a 30% rating and a 100% rating. Most veterans never learn that language. They think the VA will connect the dots automatically, but the VA doesn't connect dots. It grades evidence, and if you don't know how to frame your story in the language of medical probability and service connection, the system will assume your story doesn't add up. I've seen this happen over and over again. Combat veterans, medics, truck drivers, mechanics, pilots, men and women who gave everything only to have their claim denied because the provider wrote, veteran has back pain, instead of, it is at least as likely as not that the veteran's back pain began in service. Once you understand how the VA thinks, how it reads your claim, and what it actually looks for, everything changes. You stop feeling powerless. You start realizing this isn't about gaming the system, it's about learning the rules so you can finally play the same game the VA has been playing all along. And once you do that, your entire claim strategy transforms. I've reviewed hundreds of VA claims over the years, from combat medics to pilots to infantrymen, and I've come to realize that most denials don't happen because a veteran didn't serve, didn't get hurt, or doesn't deserve compensation. They happen because of a tiny documentation error that no one has taught us to avoid. As both a physician and a veteran, I've seen the same patterns play out again and again. A veteran will bring me a thick binder of medical records, clinic notes, lab reports, x-rays, buddy statements, and buried in there is everything the VA needs to approve the claim. But the problem isn't the evidence itself, it's how it's presented. Too often, veterans rely on generic statements such as, veteran has chronic back pain. Those statements are true, but to the VA, they're incomplete. They don't answer that one question every rater is trained to ask. Is this service connected to military service? And if that link isn't spelled out in plain medical language, the VA won't assume it. They're going to deny it. Then there's the issue of timelines, one of the biggest hidden killers of good claims. Many veterans file without a clear chronological story. They skip over when their symptoms began, how they progressed, and when the condition first showed up in their service records. Without that timeline, it's nearly impossible for a rater to track continuity, and your claim loses credibility, and fast. Perhaps the hardest part to watch, veterans often have the proof sitting right there in their files. They have the private medical records, the old imaging, even service treatment notes, but they've never been highlighted, explained, or tied to their current diagnosis. So the VA reviewer flips through it, doesn't see the connection, and then moves on. These aren't minor oversights or paperwork errors. They are the difference between a 10% rating and a 100% rating, between a few $100s a month and the full compensation you and your family actually earned. They're the reason one veteran gets 6 years of back pay, while the other, with the exact same condition, walks away empty-handed. That's why this matters so much. Once you learn how to present your evidence the way the VA needs to see it, clearly, directly, and medically supported, you stop playing defense. You stop reacting to denials. You start building claims that win the first time through. Here's the hard truth. If you don't master these 5 tricks, you're going to keep opening that brown VA envelope and seeing the same words over and over again, not service connected. And every time you read it, it chips away a little more in your trust in the system. You'll start to wonder if maybe you didn't explain it right, or maybe the VA just doesn't believe you. You'll start second guessing yourself. Was my evidence strong enough? Did I miss a form? Did they even read what I sent? Meanwhile, months or even years go by, and the back pay you should have earned sits untouched in some federal account while you're juggling rent, medications, and family expenses on a fraction of what you deserve. That's what happens when you don't know the playbook. I've seen veterans walk away from the process altogether, burned out, frustrated, and saying it's not worth it. But here's what they didn't realize. One well-written nexus, one solid timeline, or one corrective effective date could have been the key to tens of thousands of dollars in back pay. That's not an exaggeration. I've actually seen it happen. Now flip the scenario. When you do apply these 5 strategies intentionally, everything changes. Your claim stops looking like a random pile of medical notes and starts looking like a coherent story backed by evidence, written in the exact format the VA needs to approve it. You start to understand what the VA is actually asking for, and you meet them on their terms, not emotionally, but strategically. That's when you start winning. You'll see your rating go from 30 to 70% or 70 to 100%. You'll open a letter one day that says service connected, effective 2016, and you realize you just secured years of retroactive pay that you didn't even know you qualified for. More importantly, you'll finally feel the system acknowledging what you've known all along, that your service, your injuries, and your story matter. That feeling, knowing the VA finally recognized the truth, is worth just as much as the money. So the stakes couldn't be higher. If you ignore these details, the system will keep overlooking you. But if you apply them with precision, you'll finally turn the system into your favor and get the rating, the respect, and recognition you've earned through your service. I'll never forget a Marine I worked with a few years ago. He was a guy who had seen and done everything his country asked of him. He had 3 deployments, multiple combat zones, leadership roles, but when he came home, the real battle wasn't overseas anymore. It was with the VA. He'd filed for PTSD 3 separate times, and each time he was denied. Every letter he got back said the same thing: not service connected. After the 3rd denial, he told me something that stuck with me. I guess they just don't believe me. He wasn't angry, he was defeated. And that's what broke my heart, because this wasn't a man trying to game the system. This was a Marine who'd been waking up every night drenched in sweat, who couldn't sit in a crowded restaurant without scanning every corner, who'd lost 2 jobs because of panic attacks, and still thought maybe he was the problem. When I looked through his file, I saw what the VA saw. His medical provider had written a single sentence: veteran has PTSD symptoms. That was it. No timeline, no reference to his combat tours, no connection to the mortar blast that started it all, just a statement, not a story. And that's the difference most veterans never realize. To the VA, symptoms are not enough. They need a bridge, a clear medical explanation that connects the current diagnosis to what happened in service. That's what a nexus statement is supposed to do. So we rebuilt his claim from the ground up. We drafted a targeted nexus letter that said in plain medical language, based on review of the veteran's service records, including exposure to combat during Operation Iraqi Freedom and consistent symptom presentation from 2005 to present, it is at least as likely as not that his PTSD was caused by his military service. Now, we added a timeline. The first panic attack occurred after he returned home, the first counseling visit, the medication changes, the impact on work and relationships. We didn't invent anything. We just told his story in a way the VA could finally understand. A few months later, his claim came back. 100% service connected for PTSD. The VA also adjusted his effective date back to his first filing, and he received 6 years of retroactive pay. That single correction changed his entire life. He was able to move his family out of a rental, pay off his truck, and finally breathe again. But more than money, it gave him something deeper: validation. He told me, this is the first time someone believed what I've been saying for years. And that's when it hit me. This isn't just paperwork. These aren't just claims. These are veterans' lives, families, and dignity. And sometimes one small piece of evidence, one well-written nexus letter, is all it takes to turn years of rejection into recognition. That's how powerful these small details are. They don't just change ratings, they change lives. So let's get into these 5 claim tricks. Trick number 1, use a targeted nexus, not a generic note. If your VA claim was a bridge, the nexus statement is the steel beam holding it up. It's the piece of evidence that tells the VA why your diagnosis isn't just another random medical problem. It's the direct result of your service. Most veterans think, my doctor already wrote I have back pain. Isn't that enough? Unfortunately, no. A simple line like veteran has chronic back pain is a diagnosis, but it's not a connection. It tells the VA what you have, but not why you have it or when it started. And that why is everything. A targeted nexus statement does 3 specific things. It names the condition clearly, no vague language here. Instead of joint pain, it says lumbar degenerative disc disease with chronic pain. It connects the condition to service using VA-approved probability language, like it is at least as likely as not that this condition was caused by or aggravated by military service. And it backs a statement with objective evidence, service records, imaging, medical history, or credible lay statements that support the link. When a nexus is written this way, it checks every box the VA rater is trained to look for: diagnosis, service connection, and rationale. Here's what that looks like in real life. A veteran once came to me with years of denied claims for hearing loss. Every ENT note said patient has hearing loss. True, but the VA never connected it to his time on the flight line. So we rewrote it saying based on audiograms from 2004 to 2008 showing a threshold shift and consistent with acoustic trauma, the veteran's documented exposure to jet engines without adequate hearing protection, it is at least as likely as not that his hearing loss is due to military service. That one sentence transformed a flat, not service-connected, into a fully granted claim with back pay. Your nexus doesn't need to be a full-blown medical jargon letter. In fact, the best ones are written in plain English that any reader can understand. If your provider writes, it's just as likely that the veteran's migraines were caused by the blast exposure by any other factor, that meets the standard, clear, specific, and defensible. So here's a pro tip. When you ask your provider for a nexus, don't just say, can you write me a nexus letter? Explain what the VA is asking for. Tell them the VA needs a statement linking my current diagnosis to my service with your medical reasoning and supporting evidence like imaging, labs, or prior documentation. Even better, work with a provider who understands VA terminology or specializes in veteran disability evidence. They'll already know the required phrasing and how to anchor it to your records. Because here's the truth. The nexus is where most claims win or lose. You could have perfect service records and still get denied if that link isn't spelled out right. But when it's written correctly, with the right language, evidence, and reasoning, it turns your file from incomplete to undeniable. So go do this. Pull up your last claim or medical opinion. If it doesn't literally connect the dots between your diagnosis, your service event, or your current symptoms, get it rewritten. That single change could be worth thousands in benefits and years of peace of mind. Here's trick number 2. Stage your claim to capture progression. Most conditions the VA rates are not static. They change, worsen, flare up, and sometimes stabilize again. Think about it. PTSD doesn't feel the same in year 1 as it does in year 10. Arthritis doesn't magically stop at a single pain level. Hearing loss doesn't pause at the volume setting you had when you left your service. Yet far too many veterans file their claims like these conditions are frozen in time, as if the VA only cares about one snapshot. The VA actually rates based on severity over time. That means if your condition has gotten worse and you can prove when and how it happened, you're entitled to a higher rating and earlier retroactive pay for each documented stage of progression. So why staging matters? Every condition has a story. Maybe you started with mild back pain in 2015, you needed physical therapy by 2018, and then had an MRI showing disc damage in 2020. Each of those points represents a stage over time, and each stage could justify a separate rating period. If you never document those stages, the VA assumes you've been at the same since the first time you filed. So you might only get compensated at 10% when your condition has actually worsened to 40% years ago. In other words, the paper trail you build determines the timeline of your benefits. So how do you document your progression? Start with a timeline. Grab a notebook or spreadsheet and list every moment you can remember that marks a change in your condition. Include things like when symptoms first appeared or became noticeable, the first time you sought treatment, either military or civilian, when your medication dose increased or new prescriptions were added, any hospitalizations, surgeries, or therapy adjustments. What are work limitations or times you miss work because of your conditions? What are major life impacts? For instance, when PTSD began to affect relationships or sleep. Every small milestone matters. That timeline becomes the roadmap that ties your current severity back to your service and shows the VA how it got there. Then support each stage with documentation. Service treatment records for in-service events, private medical records for ongoing treatment, buddy or spouse statements describing behavioral or physical changes over time, performance reports or work evaluations that mention limitations. The more complete your timeline, the easier it is for the VA to see the story unfold. Here's an example. Let's say you have PTSD. In 2016, you were diagnosed and had mild anxiety. You could work, socialize occasionally, and sleep okay. By 2019, your symptoms worsened. You had nightmares, panic attacks, and isolation, and you started therapy. By 2022, you couldn't even keep a job because of severe depression and hypervigilance. If all you submit is your original 2016 diagnosis, the VA rates you for that early stage only. But if you document the 2019 and 2022 changes with therapy notes, medication changes, or even lay statements, you've proven progression. That could raise your rating from 30 to 70 to even 100%, and the VA can pay you retroactive for each worsening date. So the key takeaway, don't think of your claim as a single event. Think of it as a timeline of evidence that shows how your condition evolved. Each piece of that timeline, a new MRI, medication adjustment, a therapy session, is a brick in the wall of your case. So go do this. Tonight, take 10 minutes to sketch out your timeline. Mark the first symptom, the first doctor visit, every major change since. Next, gather one piece of evidence for each stage. When you build your claim this way, the VA can't ignore your story because you've turned years of scattered medical notes into a clear, chronological picture of progression. Trick number 3, don't rely only on VA records. Here's one of the biggest myths in the VA claims world. Veterans think the VA only accepts evidence that comes from VA doctors or VA hospital. That couldn't be farther from the truth. By law, the VA must consider all relevant evidence, whether it comes from a VA facility, a private doctor, a community clinic, or even a friend who served with you. But here's the catch. If you don't submit it and connect it to your claim, the VA never is going to look for it. Think of your claim like a courtroom case. The rater is the judge, and your job is to present every piece of evidence that tells your story clearly. Private medical notes, buddy statements, chaplain letters, employer write-ups, or even performance evaluations. They all paint a fuller picture of your condition and how it's affected your life. So let's take an example. A veteran I worked with had been denied for migraines twice. The VA said, no consistent treatment history, but she'd been seeing her civilian neurologist every few months. Those records never made it into the VA system because she assumed the VA already had access to them. Once we pulled those records, along with her employer's HR notes showing missed work days and a buddy statement from her spouse describing the migraines, her claim flipped from denied to fully granted at 50%. That's how powerful outside evidence can be. Here's how to make the most of it, all right? So collect everything, whether that's private medical notes, urgent care visits, mental health counseling records, physical therapy notes, and even ER summaries. Label it clearly, right at the top, private medical record supports claim for XYZ condition. Highlight what matters. If your doctor wrote, veteran's chronic back pain began after IED blast in 2008, highlight that sentence. Make it easier for the reviewer to see. Then add context. Add a short personal statement like, these records show consistent treatment from 2015 to 2020. That helps tie the evidence together. When you do this, your file stops being a stack of random documents and starts becoming a complete, undeniable story. That's what moves your claim from maybe to approved. Trick number 4, pair DBQs with a story. A disability benefits questionnaire, or DBQ, is one of the most powerful tools you can use in a claim, but it's also one of the most misunderstood. Think of a DBQ as the blueprint of your condition. It provides the VA with the hard data, such as range of motion numbers, pain levels, test results, frequency of panic attacks, you name it. But here's what veterans forget. Numbers don't tell a story. A DBQ can say limited shoulder abduction to 80 degrees, but unless you explain what that means in real life, the VA sees it as just another number on a form. That's where your narrative comes in. Pair your DBQ with a short human explanation, either written by you, your provider, or both. Describe how that limitation affects your everyday life, how it prevents you from picking up your kids, how your PTSD symptoms make you avoid crowds or lose sleep, how chronic pain keeps you from working a full-time job. The VA uses DBQs to quantify your disability, but your story helps them qualify it. Without that context, your DBQ can make you look fine on paper even when you're struggling in real life. Here is a real-world example. A veteran submitted a perfect DBQ for lumbar degenerative disc disease. Full imaging, restricted motion, pain noted, but he didn't include a narrative. The VA rated him at 20%. When he added a one-paragraph personal statement explaining how the pain limited his ability to sit for long periods and cause him to miss work every day, his rating jumped to 60%. Same data, different storytelling. So here's the pro tip. When you submit your DBQ, attach a one-pager of a functional impact statement in plain English. Describe how your condition affects your work. Like, I can't lift more than 10 pounds without severe pain. How it affects your family life. I wake up 3 times at night from nightmares. How it affects your mental health. Crowds trigger panic attacks, so I isolate myself. This combination of objective medical data plus personal impact is exactly what persuades raters to approve higher ratings. So don't let your DBQ speak alone. Give it a voice. Trick 5, don't accept the VA's first effective date. This one might be the most overlooked, but also the most profitable. Your effective date determines how much back pay you receive. It's the date the VA says your entitlements to benefits began. And here's the problem. Most veterans just accept the date the VA gives them, even when it's years later than when the condition actually started. The VA often defaults to the date you filed your most recent claim, not the date you first became disabled or the date of an earlier related claim. But under VA law, if you can show evidence that your condition began earlier or that your previous claim was denied unfairly, you can argue for an earlier effective date. That difference can mean tens of thousands of dollars in retroactive pay. For example, a veteran filed for back pain in 2016 and was denied. He filed again in 2019, this time with new imaging showing degenerative disc disease. The VA approved it, but set the effective date to 2019. We reviewed the records, showed that his 2016 claim was essentially for the same condition and included evidence that the VA had missed, and successfully appealed to have that effective date moved back to 2016. That correction alone added $40,000 in retroactive pay. Here's how to protect yourself. Always review the effective date listed on your decision letter. Compare it to the earliest date you can prove what you filed for, what you were treated for, or you were diagnosed with that same condition. If there is a gap, appeal it. Provide documentation, old service treatment notes, prior claim forms, private medical records, anything showing the earlier onset. Mention it directly in your appeal. I respectfully dispute the assigned effective date. Evidence shows my condition and claim existed as early as XYZ date. And don't assume the VA got it right the first time, because they often don't. The effective date can be one of the most financially significant parts of your claim. And it's often one of the easiest to miss because most veterans don't even realize they can challenge it. So here's a pro tip. When you receive a decision letter, before you celebrate or get frustrated, check 2 lines, the rating percentage and the effective date. If either looks off, don't accept it blindly. That's where the money usually hides. If you're ready to start putting these 5 strategies into action right now, don't wait until the next denial letter hits to get to your mailbox. Go to xterrahealth.com and let us help you take the guesswork out of your claim. Our team of physicians and veteran experts will review your medical records for free, line by line, to identify what's missing, what's strong, and where we can strengthen the link between your service and your current condition. We'll help build a complete evidence-based claim that speaks the VA's language with targeted nexus statements, detailed timelines, and documentation the VA just can't ignore. You don't have to do this alone. Every day I see veterans win claims they've been fighting for years. Not because their story changed, but because the way they told it finally matched what the VA needed to see. If you want to start right now, drop the words tricks in the comments below. I'll personally send you a sample Nexus template, a timeline worksheet, and a checklist that walks you through how to apply each of these 5 strategies step by step. The same system we use every day at Xterra Health to help veterans secure the ratings they deserve. And if you've already filed and want to see how strong your evidence really is, schedule your free record review at xterrahealth.com. No gimmicks, no pressure, just real doctors, real veterans, and real results. In my next video, I'm breaking down something every veteran needs to hear before they file another claim. 7 things that smart veterans do before filing a disability claim. Because here's the truth. The smartest veterans don't wait until the denial to learn the rules. They prepare before they ever hit submit. And that preparation can be the difference between getting approved in 6 months or fighting appeals for 6 years. So we'll cover things like how to build medical evidence before you file, what phrases in your doctor's notes can instantly strengthen your case, and the most common pre-filing mistakes that sabotage otherwise perfect claims. So if you found this video helpful, hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and share with a veteran buddy about who's about to start a claim, because the next episode could save them months of frustration and thousands of back pay. And as always, stay focused, stay prepared, and stay mission ready.